Alrighty, welcome folks to Eagles Power Hour, your official, unofficial podcast affiliate of Eastern Washington on the Big Sky Podcast Network, as well as an affiliate of FCS Fans Nation or Fans Nation Network. I'm your host, Patrick Frerks, and today we are doing a little solo Eagles Power Hour 2023 season recap. You know, Eastern Washington had a tough year in 2023. It was a really brutal year. We had a really brutal schedule, and it just was not a year that was up to the standard of Eastern Washington football. Um, just going through the record, we were 4-7 overall, 3-5 in Big Sky play, and that's just not the standard at Eastern Washington. Eastern is one of, you know, some would consider it a blue blood program in the FCS. It's a program that is known for success and expects success year in and year out. And 22 and 23, now we have 2 years back to back of being kind of a mid tier to bottom tier team in the Big Sky Conference, and that's just not the standard at Eastern Washington football. Despite being a school with limited resources, Eastern Washington is a school that expects more from its football program, and you know we're just gonna kind of go over what happened this season, where Eastern needs to improve, where Eastern struggled, and hit the high points of Eastern season as well. Despite it being a tough year, there was some positives of the year to point out overall. Uh, Individual performances that were good to see, things to note about the season, and to note about where Eastern projects as early as the 2024 season. So you know the number one thing to note about this season is the schedule was absolutely brutal, and Eastern played in a lot of one possession games. Um, we played in 6 one possession games this season, which is not the most common thing to see from an Eastern Washington team. I think in years past, it's been a lot of blowouts in the Big Sky, blowing out those bottom tier teams. And Eastern played in a lot of close games this season. Like I said, 6 one possession games, 7 if you want to count the Portland State game that was kind of back and forth. And it's a game that felt like it was a one possession back and forth game all season, all the game. It ended up being a 2 possession game, I believe, at the end. But you know, we had a 2-4 record in those one possession games. That is just brutal. Like you got to pick off more than 2 of 6 one possession games. That is just brutal. 2-5 if you include that Portland State game in there. That was more of that back and forth game. But it's just Eastern just could not come up with the big plays and the big moments this season. It felt like, and it kind of just it was tough to watch, man. Tough to watch some of those breakdowns in some of those games, man. Going through just kind of game by game here. Um, we started off the season playing in Minnesota, in Minneapolis at the Vikings Stadium, playing North Dakota State. They were ranked number 2 at the time, losing a tough fought game. We could kind of tell we were outmatched there, but coming in, Eastern expected to get absolutely blown out by a whole bunch of points, and that's not exactly what happened. It was a relatively competitive game. Not really. Like the result was never in doubt. But this is a game that personally I was afraid that Eastern was just going to get absolutely dominated and beat by, 50, 60 points. And that's not what happened. I remember watching this game and I overall wasn't too disappointed. I felt like Eastern actually had a chance to compete in this game, and they did. Um, Ended up losing another one at Fresno State. This was one of the best overall defensive performances of the season from the Eagles playing at Fresno State. A decent to good FBS school. They were a good G5 school. They were getting ranked votes. I think they ended up being ranked like a week or two after this game. We took them to double overtime. They missed a field goal as regulation ended to send us to overtime, and then we ended up going to double overtime, trading scores back and forth, and they scored in double overtime. They scored their They scored a field goal, and then Kiko ended up throwing a pick, and that's how that game ended. It felt like a game that Eastern should have won. It was a game that was very impressive defensively. That performance overall, Fresno's a good team, uh, especially offensively, and our defense held them. It's 31 points, but I believe it was 20. Shoot, believe it was, oh man, less than that in regulation. Um, the numbers math is hard. Anyways, we're gonna move on to the next game, the home opener of the game of the excuse me, the home opener of the season. I was at this game. It was a really fun game. It was hot as hell in Cheney, which is something you don't typically say about a game in September, but you know no wind this day. When we got a tiny bit of wind, it was so nice. But anyways, we played Southeastern Louisiana, who ended up not being that good, but they were ranked at the time. It was a good win. It was a game that we actually kind of had to come back from towards the end of the game. We've had a few dumb mistakes, and you could kind of tell Eastern was the better team in this game. But Southeastern Louisiana gave us a fight. We played these guys again this next upcoming season down there in Hammond, Louisiana. Should be a fun game, but this was a good one to pick up the win. It had me feeling real confident about going into Big Sky play. I was really excited. Uh, then we went down to UC Davis, who was ranked number 15 at the time, and pulled out a close one. This was a game that I personally was pretty nervous for. UC Davis is a really good school, really good team. Um, they had their struggles this year, but this is a game that Lane Larison was just electric, man. And he wasn't he wasn't just gashing Eastern Washington like some years in the past, but he had a couple of big, 50, 60-yard runs that got his total up to like I think he rushed for almost 200 yards, but ended up getting hurt. And we were helped out by a couple of, you know, Hastings really bad interceptions, and ended up pulling this game out. Great win. It was one of the best wins of the season for Eastern Washington. UC Davis was a team that probably should have made the playoffs, but ended up not. But great win this one. Then came Idaho at home. This is, of course, my um, personal favorite and least favorite game of the year every year. Uh, if for those of you that don't know, I'm a student at the University of Idaho, but I grew up an Eastern Washington fan. So I'm currently recording this from my apartment in Moscow, Idaho, and I don't know if y'all can tell, but I have my Eastern stuff everywhere. Um, you know, this is always a tough game for me, but I was at this game and sitting in the end zone next to all the Idaho fans, but rooting my tail off for Eastern Washington, and Eastern was competitive in this game. This is a Kikoa scratch game where he didn't show up, or he didn't come out dressed, and caught Idaho a little bit by surprise there. We didn't know he got hurt, uh, you know, and Jared Taylor came in and played solid. He rushed for a lot of yards. I can't remember exactly how many, but he played solid in the first half. And the second half was tough. Second half, Idaho made some adjustments defensively and really just shut down that run game. And so they ended up pulling ahead. They could rush like no other that game. They came out a little slow. Eastern came out hot, and then they made their adjustments and played really well down the stretch. And Eastern didn't quite, which is tough. But Idaho was a really good team. They're a quarterfinal team this year. Came in number 4 slash number 6 coming into the game. So Eastern was like a multi-touchdown underdog. Ended up making it an 8-point game in the end. Idaho could have scored again and made it more, but you know it was an 8-point game. Counts as a one possession game for my book. It was a game that Eastern had a competitive chance in, and just came up short in this one. But rivalry game, and this is going to be a fun one for years to come. Not so fun for me, but it's okay. Um, Now at Idaho State was a really really tough one. Um, this is a game that like I said, I'm a student at the University of Idaho, so I watched the first half of this game, and Eastern was up by something like 20 points, and Idaho had a home game that day that I was attending, so I decided, oh, I'll just watch the second half of this game on replay. You know, um, we're up by 20 points, should be an easy win. I'm gonna go tailgate at the Idaho game and talk to all my friends or people that I talk to, from Tubbs and all that. Ended up checking the score when I was in line to get into the Kibi Dome, and all of a sudden we were down by a point, and I was like, "What the hell is happening?" The whole onside kick situation happened. yada yada yada. Missed the kick. This was just a second half breakdown for the ages. This was one of the more brutal, like just toughest losses I've experienced as an Eastern fan. Honestly, um, it this was a really really brutal one, just because I up by 20 something points, multiple possessions, ended up choking this one away in the second half, and that's just something that can't happen. This was not that it felt like a turning point, but it felt like this is where Eastern went from a team that was, okay, cool. Eastern can be outside of the top 25, playoff potential outsider to the playoff on the border there team. And this was like a reality check. Oh, what the heck happened here? Like losing to Idaho State, this can't happen. And it was just a brutal one offensively. Eastern looked amazing in the first half, and the second half just looked horrible. And kind of the opposite for Idaho State. So this was a brutal one. But this Weber State game, the next one, was probably the most complete game Eastern played all season. And I was extremely impressed with the performances offensively, rushing the ball. We rushed for almost 200 yards this game versus Weber State. Came out with the win. I was super excited. This is a game that I wish I could have gone to. I just couldn't make it. I was out of town, and amazing sights for homecoming after the game, seeing all the fireworks. Just an awesome performance, awesome game to pull out there. I believe, this was Richie's starting debut for Weber State. And so we kind of saw when Weber played Idaho later in the year, Richie's legit, man. He looks good. He looks the part. And so they have a good defense. So, being able to run the ball on that Weber State defense was really impressive for me. Tuna had an absolute day that day. And like I said, overall, the most complete performance of the season. This is a game that if you're looking for more of a positive outlook on the season, this is a game to go back and watch. Go watch, what all happened there. It was a fun one to listen to on the. I was in the car. I was listening to it, and I was really excited up and down. Excited, really sad, really upset. All the different emotions came into this game. It was a really fun one. I was so happy that we pulled this one off, and all the pictures. Like I've been saying on Twitter the past couple weeks, a couple of years, honestly, over and over. Eastern creatives are the best. The fireworks produce some awesome pictures. Go check out the photo gallery of this one. Really awesome stuff. Then came at Portland State down in Hillsborough High. This is a game that, you know, we had a chance if we were able to win out except for Montana State to be a fringe playoff team. And this Portland State game was a must have. And we just absolutely face planted defensively. This was one of the more brutal games to watch. We just got ran all over. We gave up almost 400 yards on the ground, or I believe we did give up 400 yards on the ground, and it was just something that was insane. I know we missed 2 field goals as well in this game. Uh, just this was just a collapse defensively from start to finish. Just you can't give up 47 points in a must-win game like this. If Eastern was to have an outside shot, this was Dam Cup was the game you had to win, for sure. And just couldn't make it happen, man. We got our butts whooped a little bit. It was a back and forth game, but it really felt like a butt whooping because we could not get a stop in this game, man. 400 yards on the ground is just unacceptable. That's something we got to fix, man. Um, then came Cal Poly. I was at this game as well. It was a torrential downpour. Holy crap. It was just brutal. It was freezing. It was raining so hard that it soaked through my rain jacket. I stayed till halftime and ended up having to leave because of how soaked I was. I just couldn't bear it anymore. We were up by so many points. It's whatever. This is a good win. Cal Poly is horrendous. This was the return of Paul Wolf, Tuccini, and I believe JC Sherritt's on the staff down there. Whole bunch of former Eastern, EWU South is what it had been called by a few people in the past couple of years. They had a tough year, but I was happy with the defensive performance in this game. Despite it being a torrential downpour, and passing the ball was tough. It kind of forced Cal Poly to run the ball. And they're not a good rushing defense or rushing offense by any means, but we were able to relatively shut down their rushing game compared to averages that Eastern was giving up. And this was a good win. We had a couple really good defensive plays. Demarcus Johnson, I believe, won Big Sky Player of the Week defensively for this game. I believe Cage Skank had a pick six. I think it was Cage Skank had a pick six in this game right in front of us in the end zone. Really fun game, wearing the all white jerseys on the red, which was a strange one. Kind of weird playing a blackout versus whiteout kind of game, rooting for the white team on the red. It was strange. But, anyways, this was, overall just a fun one to watch. Some young guys got some time. I believe Nate Bell got some time in this game. Had to have to go back and watch that second half to really analyze it further. But this was, overall good performance. Probably should have beat them worse. Michael Wortham had a really nice return to start the game off, as well as Justice Jackson had a really nice run to start the game off. Was a good just team win and a good one moving forward. It had me thinking, maybe Eastern has the tiniest little fighting chance at Montana State and Bozeman. Eastern, for whatever reason, has always kind of had the Bobcats number a little bit. They've always kept those games close with Montana State. Um, we were able to play them tough last year. It's a game that I think a lot of Eag fans and I personally felt like we should have won last season on the red. Uh, you know, we kind of fumbled that game away at the end, it felt like, even though Sean Chambers just ran all over us. But I kind of had a sliver of hope going into this game. Like, hey, if we win out here, we have 6-5 with a ranked win or two ranked wins at the time, or three ranked wins at the time, including SLU. So, I was like, well, maybe the tiniest little outside chance. And then we just got absolutely shit on by Montana State, start to finish. They rushed for over 250 or 225 yards or something nuts, and just not ideal. We kind of got our butts whooped this week, and it really sucked. I thought we had I thought we had a fighting chance, but nope. It was another tough one that felt like we should have put on a better performance, and we just didn't. And then goes in Northern Arizona, and this game I just absolutely ate crow. Um, I believe Northern Arizona was favored by 3, and I was telling all my friends that bet on games, hammer Eastern Washington. They're going to win on senior day on the red. We don't lose on the red. It's Northern Arizona. Yeah, they're okay. We're probably about the same. But unfortunately, we couldn't stop the rush again. And when it came, this was a game that we were down by multiple scores and rallied back, which was really impressive. Esvin Chisholm had an amazing game this day. Uh, you know, Offensively, it was a good performance. But defensively, again, we gave up 300 something yards on the ground, I believe, and just freaking lost this game for this team. And that was kind of the theme of the season, which is nothing new for Eastern Washington fans. Defense is really struggling and kind of giving away games. And some of it goes on to the offense as well, in certain games, like in this Fresno State game. If the offense could get something going, I think we had a better chance at winning that game. I think we could have won that game in regulation. We should have won that game in overtime. We forced them to kick a field goal in double overtime, got the ball back, and we turned the ball over. We don't turn the ball over. We either force a third overtime, or you know, we just win that game. And oh, excuse me, I said that wrong. We threw a pick in double overtime when we had the ball first and just allowed them to get a field goal to win the game. You know, this is the game we should have scored a touchdown, and we didn't. Davis as well. We should have gotten more going offensively. We just couldn't. We did end up pulling that game away, but whatever. Idaho, the second half, we just needed to get more creative with our play calls, and we couldn't because Kiko was hurt, and Jared Taylor and Michael Wortham aren't the most impressive through the air as quarterbacks, and they did really well with their legs. And defensively, again, we struggled, but wish we could have gotten more done offensively. But overall, it's just the defense. Idaho State giving up 41 points to Idaho State, just brutal. Um, giving up 47 points to Portland State and losing the damn cup in back-to-back seasons is just unacceptable at Eastern Washington. That's not the standard. That's not okay. And if there is a fireable offense, losing the damn cup in back-to-back seasons is there. There was a lot of cries for the coaching staff's head this season from both Big Sky fans, Eastern Washington fans, just nationally. People even were like, "Is Aaron Best going to have a job at the end of the season?" And I wasn't totally sure, to be completely honest with you guys. Um, I I thought he might get canned, honestly. But he didn't. And we did see the defensive coordinator get fired, which is, that is kind of what we expected to see at least someone on the coaching staff change, and I'm happy that there was at least a change on the staff there. But moving into more of, an overall analysis of the season. We're gonna go through each phase of the game. In offensive defense, we're gonna give a what went well, a what went bad. But we'll start it off here first with the special teams units. Um, Overall, special teams was okay. But it was a major improvement over some of the units that we had in previous years. I just remember that 2021 season, special teams is why that team struggled. Um, we just special teams we got exploited in that 2021 playoff run to play Missoula. We played Missoula and just got absolutely beat there. Um, and so it's a major improvement over that level of special teams, but they were still spotty at times. Um, Kick return to Michael Wortham was absolutely electric this season. He was number 4 in kick return yards. That's including both punt return and kick returning yards. He was just behind Junior Bergen, Jermaine Jackson, and someone from Mercer. I can't remember his name. But, Junior Bergen or Jermaine Jackson are both guys who returned both punts and kickoffs. And they were only about, Michael Wortham was only about 60 yards behind JJ, if I'm remembering right. Bergen and Jermaine Jackson are two of the most electric special teams kick returners in the country, in the nation, and Wortham was just behind there. Getting that from your backup quarterback is incredible, man. But Wortham's an electric kick returner. I cannot wait to see him here his senior season, returning more kicks and hopefully getting used in the offense more. But yeah, 742 yards kick returning, which was excellent. He had multiple really good kick returns. That Cal Poly one is one that I can remember off the top of my head, but overall, just really solid. Um, Punter Nick Kokic had a really good year as well. He was a top 25 in the nation in yards per punt. He averaged 42 yards per punt. He was just really solid for Eastern overall. You don't remember a bunch of like shanks or it being a problem at all. Kokic played, I believe he's punted for 3 years here, and he was just really solid. Great dude. I've spoken with him a little bit just after the games, just saying like, good job, you're a stud, whatever. But yeah, overall really solid for Kokic punting. Kicker Soren McKee, he was okay kicking field goals. He felt more consistent than some kickers we've had in the past, but he did miss a few big time kicks. I believe he missed 2 kicks at Idaho State or 2 kicks at Portland State. He missed 1 kick that was, a potential game winner, go ahead kick at Idaho State at the end there in a game that he shouldn't have had to do that. But, he had an okay season. He had a long of 40. He went 11 for 17, but 2 of those kicks were blocked, which is something that we need to improve defense or on special teams. We can't be having kicks blocked. But if we remove those 2 blocks, it was 11 for 15 this year. Missing 4 kicks, it's not too insanely horrible. So you know, Sora McKee was solid. I think he'll just improve. I believe he's only a redshirt freshman this season. Like, I can't remember quite. Kicker Jackson Cleaver, he was the kickoff specialist this season, but he did kick 3 field goals. He went 3 for 3 in his field goals. He kicked a 44-yarder, I believe was his long. But like I said, he was mainly a kickoff guy. He kicked off solid. He netted over 4,100 yards kickoffs. And he made 3 tackles on kickoff as well, which is just a fun stat. Long snapper Tyson Jacobson was overall solid as well. He had a really tough game in that rain versus Cal Poly. I think he snapped it over Kokic's head twice, which is not ideal, and gives me those PTSD moments of Weber State in 2022 when they gave up 8 points to Montana State via snapping over the punter's head. But overall he was solid. He wasn't extremely bad or extremely good, just good. But now we're gonna get more into the meat of things. You know, what went bad defensively? This was the killer of Eastern Washington this season. And how many times have we said that? A lot. I just sometimes it's tough to be a fan and know like why is the defense so bad every fucking year. Sorry for pardon the French, but it gets frustrating sometimes. And the defense just flat out sucked. Here's a couple numbers here. Eastern Washington was number 116 in the country in total defense. We allowed 454 yards a game. We allowed just shy of 5,000 total yards on the year defensively. To give a little perspective on those numbers, the best defense in the country, they gave up just 257 yards a game. We're giving up almost double that. They allowed 3,800 total yards on the season. You know what's different about South Dakota State? They played another 4 games. They played a full playoff run in the national championship game, and they gave up still 1,000 yards less than us, 1,200 yards less than us. It's just ridiculous. Like it just can't happen. They played almost half another season, and you know, 1,200 less yards. That's just it can't happen. We are number 115 in scoring defense this season. We allowed 36 points a game. South Dakota State again. This is something to note. South Dakota State is one of the best defenses we've ever seen at the FCS level, scoring defense wise. I think they are the best scoring defense in like 20 years, but they allowed like 10 points a game. We allowed 36. We bottom 10. This is just horrible. I believe there's only 126 teams or 128, 126 teams in the FCS. We are 116 in total defense and 115 in scoring defense. Just it's not good. But the main killer on defense was, I know it's a shocker to hear, the rushing defense. The rushing defense was just absolutely piss poor this season. We are again one of the worst in the country. We were number 118 in the country in rushing defense. We allowed 2,500 yards, 2,554 yards in the ground total, and 232 yards per game, which is just piss poor. It's absolutely horrible, and it's just unfortunate, man. We allowed. I'm gonna go through this and kind of give you guys some of the net how many rushing yards we allowed per game here, going game by game, just to give an idea of like where these numbers are coming from. Here is I'm just pulling up some of the stats here for you guys to look at, but rushing yards allowed game by game here. We allowed 337 yards on the ground versus North Dakota State, 132 at Fresno State. That was one of our better performances defensively all year. 152 yards versus Southeastern Louisiana. Again, not great, but it's not the worst in the world. 272 yards given up on the ground against Davis. 363 rushing yards allowed versus Idaho. 49 versus Idaho State, which was, the lowest total rushing on the season, but something to note. Idaho State is the second worst rushing offense in the country, and they averaged, I believe, 6 rushes like a game at that point in the season. Like they throw the ball 60 times a game. So allowing 49 yards, whoop-de-doo. They don't run the ball. 156 yards versus Weber State. Again, allowing well over 100 yards isn't ideal, but it's good for Eastern Washington standards. That was a great performance overall for a full team defense perspective. But then when you get to Portland State, 403 yards net on the ground at Portland State. That's despicable. And I know Portland State was one of the better rushing defenses in the country last year, but it just can't happen, man. It's just brutal, man. 112 yards on the ground versus Cal Poly. This was honestly one of the better performances defensively on the ground. Cal Poly, though, not a good rushing offense. They're passing offense. They're trying to, do that spread thing that Paul Wolf and Bo Baldwin brought into Eastern Washington back in the 2010s and 2000s, and allowing 100 yards to that isn't great. This is also a game where it was pouring rain, and we only gave up 112 yards, so they had to run the ball, but they were down by so much they had to throw the ball. So it was okay. Whoop de doo, 100 yards. Then we go to Bozeman. We gave up 275 yards on the ground, then 310 versus Northern Arizona on Senior Day on the red, giving up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. We allowed over 200 yards rushing. Wait, am I counting right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yards. Yep, 6 games over 200 yards. And 4 games we allowed over 300 yards rushing. That's just despicable, man. And one game over 400 yards. That's just some of the worst rushing defense I've ever seen at Eastern Washington. And what was really frustrating about this, watching these games back on tape, is this wasn't just a case of Eastern Washington getting blown off the ball every snap. This wasn't our interior offensive lineman being 40 yards or 40 pounds lighter than the O lineman and just getting driven back, because that's been the story at Eastern Washington in years past. What was frustrating was this was something like 60 to 75% of this yardage was all off of misdirection and running on the outside. We weren't getting gashed by getting driven back by offensive linemen and just, absolutely just getting dominated. That wasn't what was happening. What was happening is we were playing undisciplined on defense. We were being fooled by, fake handoffs, quarterbacks pulling a ball and like trying to go make plays that weren't like your gap and your responsibility. This was something I don't like to single players out, but Ben Allen really struggled with this, early in the year where he kind of go try to make a play, which is something I love about him, but it also kind of bit us in the butt because cutbacks would just destroy Eastern's defense. Like it against an offense that was playing to run in the specific gap every play, Eastern was able to hold them relatively, to lower numbers. We weren't, like I said, we weren't getting blown off the ball. We weren't just getting physically dominated. We were getting beat by finesse. We were getting beat by misdirection. We were getting beat by scheme. We were getting outcoached, is how I felt about it. It really, a lot of the defensive miscues, especially in the run game, it felt like all correctable things. It felt like, our defensive end just tried to run backwards and inside to go stop this dive play while their quarterback pulled the ball and ran it for 30 yards because our defensive end lost contain. We're just overall it was just undisciplined, playing with bad eyes, being fooled by play action, being fooled by misdirection. If they pulled a lineman, half of our defense would be out of position. Almost the whole defense would be out of position if they just pulled a lineman in the opposite direction and the quarterback kept it the other way. It was just brutal, frustrating because like I said, it felt like all correctable things. And this is why I was very frustrated with defensive coordinator Jeff Kopp. I am sure he's an amazing dude. I don't know him personally, but it just felt like this was a situation where our DC struggled to know, like, or struggled to coach playing gap sound and struggled to coach responsible eye or keeping disciplined eyes and not getting fooled by that misdirection. That's something that great defenses don't struggle with. That's like for me, like in the North Dakota State game, we had multiple plays where we would do this misdirection and they weren't fooled at all. We're getting tackled in the backfield. Kikoa fakes a handoff and keeps it when he's getting tackled in the backfield. And then North Dakota State does it and they run for 20 yards. Or Fresno State does it and they run for 20 yards. Or, Idaho does like a pitch to Jermaine Jackson around the outside, and they run it for whatever 60 yards like they did in that one play, and we're sitting here on our heels already. You know, it's just frustrating because it's all coachable. It's not our guys being out physicaled. It's all our guys getting out schemed, out prepared, out coached, being unprepared and undisciplined, and that's things that it was frustrating this season. But I think it is things that will get corrected with a new DC, or that should get corrected with a competent defensive coordinator. Um, you know, if you guys did not know, defensive coordinator Jeff Kopp was fired at the end of the season, or let go, or parted ways, whatever the terminology will be. He's not coming back in 2024. He coordinated two of the worst defense, or the worst rushing defenses in the country 2 years in a row. Both were bottom 10 rushing defenses. And so, I mean, I'm thankful that we've moved on from Jeff Kopp, and I feel bad saying that because I'm sure he's a great dude. All Eastern coaches have always, for me at least, my experiences with them have been great guys, but it was time. And so I'm really hoping we get a DC in there that can correct these minor issues, because I don't think it's a talent issue. I think there's some positions that we could use some speed that we didn't have in 24. We could use a more athletic linebacker and maybe some more speed on the edge, but like, we could be a solid defense, much more solid than we are with the talent we have, with a, you know, fixing some schematic problems, and fixing discipline problems, and fixing pursuit problems. Um, Another thing to note that is just kind of signs of a poorly coached defense. Our third down defense was horrible. We are number 99 in the country in third down percentage against. We gave up third downs 44% of the time. One of those that I can just think of is in the fourth quarter. We gave up like a 3rd and 20 on the game tying drive in the fourth quarter to Fresno State. It's just stuff like that where we just cannot get off the field on third down. This was the same story in 2022, and it's something that we need to figure out there. And I think a new DC will be improved there. We couldn't stop teams on fourth down either. We were number 108 in the country in fourth down conversion defense. We gave up 65% of fourth downs. And I know that that's not exactly a perfect stat, but still, like, you got to make more than that. Like, you can't allow 65% of fourth down attempts. Like, fourth down stops are such big plays, and we just really struggled with that. Another telltale sign of a just overall poorly coached defense. We allowed scores 85% of the time in the red zone. Our red zone defense was the 91st in the country. It was just piss poor. Once a team got into the red zone, it was almost always an automatic score. And that's something that wasn't true of older defenses on Eastern teams that were successful, that were, more stout overall. They'd make those plays in the freaking in the red zone to stuff a team or hold them to a field goal. We allowed touchdowns 76% of the time. I believe it was something like 27 touchdowns in 47 attempts, or 30 touchdowns and 40 something. I can't remember the exact number, but over 30 touchdowns in the red zone. We only forced 4 field goals in the red zone. Or allowed 4 field goals in the red zone, I should say. And there was seven times we only allowed, or only kept a team out of the end zone, or out of the field goal. 7 times we didn't let the team score, is what I should say there. That's kind of the way we play defense, with a lot of soft zone and a lot of stuff like that. You have to bend but not break. And we bended and then we broke. And that's not something that can happen. That's just, it's just coaching. And I hate ragging on coaches, but that is kind of what that felt like to me. Just watching it back, it felt like a lot of missed assignments, or undisciplined, getting beat on the edge because we're crashing super hard when we should be containing. And trying to go make a tackle on the opposite side of the field when we should be playing our gap, and then all of a sudden they cut back and go for 50 yards down the field. Just stuff like that was really brutal. The other thing that I got upset with at times is we were just not able to adjust to matchup. We Our defense just allowed a lot of really dumb matchups. For an example of this is if a team lined up their best receiver at running back before the play and then shifted that guy out wide, we would not bring a corner in to cover that wide receiver. We would have a linebacker shift out and play them. And this led to a lot of mismatches where we had a guy like Ben Allen covering their team's best slot receiver one on third downs. And this is something that a lot of Big Sky teams do well in exposing those, but this is something that got Idaho at times this year. It got Eastern really bad at times this year. It got many teams at times this year where they're creating those matchups to have your speedy slot guy on a linebacker by lining him up in the backfield. And I never saw that adjustment to address it. We are allowing it to happen into the end of the season, and it's something that I wish we could get addressed. Um, and it just never did. And that's a DC thing that, you know, for example, I know I reference Idaho a lot, but I pay attention to them a lot. I do stuff for Tibbs Club, so I pay attention. Rob Arich made those adjustments in 23 for the Vandals. In the Montana game, they did that exact thing where they lined up Junior Bergen in the backfield and then shifted him out so he's one-on-one with a linebacker in coverage, and Bergen burned him. Well, next week when they play Montana State tried to do the same thing, and they adjusted. They brought in Marcus Harris from the outside, put him on that receiver, put the linebacker out on the running back who split out wide, and adjusted. It's just those adjustments in game is where I felt we really lacked overall on the coaching staff, but defensively particularly, it was just adjustments weren't happening when they needed to happen, and I'm going to move on here because we all know the defense sucks. Like, it's been a glaring, obvious problem for years, but I just kind of wanted to dive into it a little bit deeper on this podcast. And, you know, that's kind of all I got to say. But, I mean, it was a lot of negative, almost all negative, but there was a few there was a few bright spots on the defense, in my opinion. There are a few guys that impressed me, a few young guys especially that impressed me. The first position group I want to hit on that I was actually thought had a really solid season, which is again why I was so frustrated with the coaching staff. The interior defensive line impressed me a lot this season. Um, Junior Matt Brown had an outstanding season this year. If I'm not mistaken, he actually was one of the top tacklers on the team. Correct? Yeah, he had 18 tackles or 36 tackles. The dude had 3 sacks. He had he made a lot of big plays, and it didn't show up necessarily all in the stat book here, but he was a game wrecker on the inside, man. He came on later into the season. He kind of he didn't start off the season as strong as some of the other guys, but I really liked what he brought to the table coming towards the end of the year. He was being a game wrecker on the inside. He was a matchup nightmare, dude that was constantly in the backfield, especially in Big Sky play. And I really liked what I saw from him. He took a huge step improvement wise from 2022, and he's a guy that I think is going to be a stud in 2024. Cannot wait to see him. Another guy that had a great season as well. I'm not sure if Jacob Newsome is coming back, but he had a great season in 2023. I wasn't there for senior day, so I didn't see if he walked or what. He's listed as a senior, but I don't think he's used his COVID year. I'm not totally sure though. So he might be back, he might be not. The days of eligibility are still confusing. I am not sure, but I would love to have him back because he was a stud this year. Number 99, big number 99, Jacob Newsome in the middle. He had a great season against both the run and the pass. He had multiple sacks this year as well. I cannot remember exactly how many. I'll take a quick look here. He had 2 sacks, but he was more effective to me. Oh, excuse me. He had 2 TFLs and 1 sack, but he was more effective to me against the run. He was good at shedding defenders, and overall, I thought he played well on the interior line. He wasn't a guy that got dominated. He would hold his stout. He'd hold the interior stout. and played well there, which I like to see. But besides Matt Brown, Jacob Newsom, and one other senior, I cannot remember the guy's name. The rest of this interior O line were all young guys that played really well. For freshmen especially. Number 78, Justice Laulu, I believe is how you pronounce it. There's some interesting names here that I'm not good. He was a redshirt freshman out of Colorado. He played really solid this year. Big number 78. You can kind of tell visually. He just looks like the biggest dude on the field. He's over 300 pounds. And having a big dude like that up front really made a difference in terms of getting dominated physically, which is something that has happened to Eastern in the past. It wasn't happening this year. And a big number 78 was a big part of that, as well as Matt Brown and Jacob Newsom. We're not getting driven back 3 yards. We're holding stout, taking up 2 offensive linemen. You know, just I was really impressed with some of these young guys, as well as number 98, Jaira Lea Puputelli, something like that. I am so sorry for butchering that. He was a true freshman who rotated in at the defensive line, big number 98, another 300 plus pound dude. He looks the part. He looks like a guy that could be a real contributor here in 24, especially if Newsom leaves, whether it be graduation or portal or whatever. But um, the interior line was a position group that I was really impressed with, and I thought played really well. And when you see a team with numbers like Eastern Washington against the rush, you kind of expect that interior defensive line to suck. They didn't, in my opinion. They were pretty solid. I believe Matt Brown was the guy that got looks. He got looks for some sort of national list. I cannot remember, but he was a guy that got a little bit of national attention. Like, oh, this guy plays really well for Eastern, this team that sucks at defense, apparently. But the middle two in that 4-2-5, 4-3 scheme, they were stout all season, and I was impressed with them. Sometimes when you get the threes in there, they started getting pushed back a bit, but I thought they played well all season overall. Another couple guys to mention that I was really impressed with, and I'm excited for their futures. Ben Voigtlander, number 55. He's a redshirt freshman that played the edge in 2023. I think he's gonna be a stud. He played really solid there. He's not the freakiest athlete in the world or whatever, but the dude just has a nutty motor that, you know, he made a lot of plays chasing down. He made a lot of tackles chasing down plays from the backside, and I think he's a dude that has the potential. He plays very gap sound, and he plays very responsible on the edge there, which is something that we got spurned with a bit in 2023. Guys trying to make plays that weren't theirs. That was something that happened a little bit with Demarcus Johnson, and this isn't a shot at Demarcus Johnson because he was an athletic. He's a beast, man. He played really well there, but um, I think Voigtlander is a little bit more gap sound at that position, and he plays more. He plays his responsibility a little bit better, and I'm excited to see what his future looks like. I think to me, he seems like a stud. That he reminds me of what Brock Harrison was like as a redshirt freshman, young guy, who ended up being the number 4 as a senior this season on the edge there. He had a good season as well. He got taken advantage of a little bit early, playing a little undisciplined, but he adjusted later in the season and ended up having a very solid season. Number 4, Brock Harrison did. Jaden Radke was another true freshman that played some significant time on the edge that looked okay. He doesn't look like a crazy all-conference type player or anything like that, but he looks serviceable at the position. He has the size for it. He's a true freshman, getting those reps there. This defense was incredibly young, guys. Redshirt freshman interior defensive lineman Isaiah Perez played really well as well. Played relatively well as well. Came in pretty undersized. He's a transfer from BYU. Fun fact: I actually played against him in high school. I'm a sophomore in high school, and he graduated my sophomore year of high school. And the dude's just a redshirt freshman because I think he went on a mission when he was going to BYU. So it's just kind of funny. But I had to block him in high school, and the dude just game wrecker. Anyways, for being kind of an undersized defensive tackle, he played really well overall. He made a lot of little crafty plays using his quickness and speed to play. He played well in conference play, especially out of conference. He got taken advantage of size wise a bit, but overall, I thought he played well, especially for being one of those younger guys. Even though he's not young age wise necessarily, but younger class wise, not as much experience. He's good. It's good to see from those interior spots a lot of youth, you know, playing well. For me, it didn't feel like lapses in tackling was the killer of this defense. It really felt like just dumb missed assignments, dumb scheme, stuff like that. Um, a few linebackers as well that were young that didn't really see a ton of playing time, but when they got in, they just showed some flashes of brilliance. Man, number 58, Amani Williams, as a guy that I think will get some playing time here up this next upcoming season. He just showed a lot of athleticism, and a few times he saw the field. Um, Man, my mind is escaping me. So those young linebackers that we haven't seen yet from the last 2 or 3 classes that, you know, athletic, quick guys that are coming up and will play more in 24. There was a few flashes of that talent. I think consistency is where they're gonna struggle, and so I think as they're getting older, they're improving there. Um, the secondary honestly was a bright spot for the Eastern Washington team, in my opinion. It played very well despite being really young. There was one senior that got a lot of playing time, Marlon Jones Jr., who, he was an individual standout. The dude had multiple picks. He's a guy that's headed to the transfer portal he's headed to SEC Vanderbilt. He was a guy with multiple picks. He had 3 picks. He had 4 PBUs. I know he had a pick 6 or 2. I can't remember exactly how many, but um, you know, he was a bright spot on the secondary for sure, but he wasn't a guy that played every down, every game. He kind of rotated in with these other guys, these young guys. There was a few redshirt sophomores, so redshirt sophomore corner, Dejean Wells. Uh, he played really solid. He looked good on film, looked the part. Redshirt sophomore corner, Alphonse Owiwak. He was transferred from Washington State. I am so sorry for butchering that name. He was number 36, I believe. He looked really good in the secondary and coverage, especially, but he came up and made a few tackles as well. Uh, Safety Armani Orange, who's a redshirt sophomore as well. He had a really solid season in the secondary. He struggled tackling overall, but he looked okay in coverage, especially. He looked good. True freshman safety Drew Carter was another guy that had some bright. He showed some flashes of brilliance there coming up. He's a guy that came up and crashed really hard as a safety. Um, he had his freshman mistakes where he kind of got burnt in coverage, but it's going to happen. But it's good to see a freshman getting playing time like that. It means he has a high ceiling usually. Um, as well as slot corner, Cage Skank had a pretty solid year. He's a really small dude that you wouldn't expect to be playing. He had to play some, again, a scheme thing that I personally am not a fan of, but it happens in our scheme. He had to play like in the box sometimes as that DB. He kind of turns into an outside linebacker when there's certain shifts happen. And shoot, dude, for being 5'8", a buck 60, the dude can go make a hit, and that was really impressive to me. He had a good year playing that slot corner spot. Um, One of the bigger highlights of the season for me that was tough to see him get hurt was redshirt sophomore safety Kentrell Williams. He played his butt off. He plays so hard on the defensive side of the ball. He's a dude that comes up and fits the run like an absolute maniac. He hits like a truck despite being like 5'9", 180 pounds, playing that strong safety kind of spot. Um, he's a dude that I hope we can get a little bit of load off of him in 24 because he's a dude that plays so hard. He makes those big plays in the run game, and he's an overall solid cover safety as well. But he's a small dude, man. And so making so many big hits over a full season just kind of wears down on your body. And I think that's why he ended up missing 2 games with injury this season and was kind of beat up for multiple. Um, I definitely think getting him a little bit more help at that strong safety position with guys like a tackle. I know there's a couple incoming freshmen that definitely fit that mold. A guy like Connor Walker, a guy like Tyus Donovan, maybe they're not ready to play right away, but maybe play some situational reps there. Um, you know, Kentrell was definitely a bright spot in the secondary, especially tackling wise. He was one of the team's leading tacklers. He had a lot of tackles, which is not necessarily a great thing, but he played well. I really liked what he could do. he just came up and fit the run. So aggressive, so hard, and just ball of energy. I loved watching him. Can't wait to see him back in 2024. Another thing we did okay on defense. We were middle of the pack forcing turnovers. We forced 15 turnovers, which could be a lot worse, but uh, overall it was solid. Um, we being middle of the pack's okay. At least we forced some turnovers, but we need to force more if we're going to be an Eastern Washington defense that gives up so many yards like usual. Um, we also scored 4 defensive touchdowns, which was tied for second most total in the country, which is a fun thing to see. We had a couple pick sixes and 1 or 2 fumble recovery touchdowns, which fun to see points get put up by the defense. Uh, that's kind of what Eastern's defense thrives on is those turnovers, those momentum, scoring points on defense, getting excited for the offense. So, um, yeah, moving into the offense here. We're gonna hit the bad on offense first. Get the bad news out of the way. Um, I felt like offensively, our offensive line in 2023 struggled getting to the second level in the run game. Um, we have a freaking huge offensive line in general. I believe they average over 300 pounds, 6'4", 300 pounds, or something large. A lot of big dudes. But it felt like our guys didn't have the athleticism to go get up and get hands on backers in the second level, and that's why we struggled running the ball so much. Um, we did run the ball for 1,600 yards this year, but it it felt like there was so many yards left on the table, and I felt like we couldn't get any push, and we couldn't get a hands on the backers, especially in those first like 4 or 5 games. Um, it, it it's really tough for a running back to get much more than 2 yards if we can't get a guard's hands on a backer or a tight end's hands on a backer. And when we did, we're breaking 8-yard runs. We're breaking 9-yard runs consistently when we could get a hand on the backer. Um, that's something that I think is getting addressed through these recruiting classes these last 2 years. There's been a lot more athletic, quick guys on the line, but it it will be good to see as the unit develops and stuff. Um, if we can get more hands on that second level, that's got to be the main emphasis this offseason. I think if we want to lean more on the run game, lean more on Tuna, like it seems like Coach Best wants to. Tuna carried the ball like 120 times this year. If we're gonna be giving him that type of volume, we need to open up more holes for him. And I think the way to do that is get a hand on a backer. That's what we got to do. That's got to be the theme of the offseason blocking wise. We had a few, especially early, we struggled a bit blocking stunts in the pass game, but I do think a lot of that was just having a new freshman, not new freshman, a new center being the only new returning offensive lineman on that unit. We got kind of used to having Dahlgren play that center spot, and he shifted over to guard, and in came Jack Seeley, I believe is how you pronounce it. He came in at the center spot. He's more of the athletic, more of an athletic center, which I liked. He can go pull really well, but he struggled a bit early, just a little mental errors, blocking the wrong guy and stuff. But that felt like it got turned around a little bit later into the season, um, which is something that's just going to improve with time. I believe 4 of the 5 starters will be coming back again this season. I believe one of the tackle spots is open, so I'm assuming if big number 70 Matt, if he stays, he'll move over there, or we'll kind of see who ends up taking that spot at the position that I'm going to keep my eyes open for in fall camp. But um, you know, they struggle at times. The offensive line felt like more of the weakness of the offense this year, which was kind of tough. And don't get this wrong, guys. I fucking love our offensive linemen. I love those dudes. They're all amazing guys. But this is just straight up what jumped out on the tape to me. Um, really, I thought um, another thing that I really wanted to see more of from the offense is I wish we used Michael Wortham more. He's one of those dudes that you see him carry the ball once, and you're like, oh, that's a game changer right there. That's a talent. That dude's electric. And we got him a number of touches, but it really felt like we could have gotten him the ball a lot more. Um, you know, you know, 43 attempts for in the rushing the ball. I felt like we could have lined him up as a linebacker a lot more this season and used him as a wildcat quarterback more. And I know we did to an extent, but personally, I just felt like we should have gotten in the ball in space more. I feel like that could have been something fun and explosive for the offense. I think he's going to be a more of a focal point in 2024, hopefully. Um, offensively, something to be improved. We turned the ball over a little bit too much. We turned the ball over 14 times, which isn't horrible, but 10 of those were interceptions. Kikoa is young. He was a sophomore. His decision making still developing. He's still getting better. You know, he's still struggling a bit with those interceptions. 19 to 10 interception to touchdown ratio. You'd like to see that a little bit better, I'm sure it will be here this upcoming season with Kiko getting older, with his targets being more reliable. Um, it, that is something to improve. Kikoa's accuracy is a little bit of a concern at times. He was known to miss high, and when you miss high, that leads the opportunity of a ball getting tipped and getting picked off, and situations like that, which did happen at times in 2023, but I think that's something that will improve over time. Um, there was also a few times, Kiko is young again. He made a few wrong reads in the kind of read option RPO game where it was, should have handed the ball off and he kept it, or should have handed the ball off or kept it and ran and he threw the RPO and it went through a defender's hands or got picked off, and situations like that will be improved as he gets older. That decision making and stuff like that. Like you gotta temper the expectations. Like, dude was a redshirt sophomore, and dude, you can kind of tell the dude's electric. The dude's so athletic, but he's kind of raw, and he makes those dumb plays every once in a while. The accuracy is still developing. I think he has such a high upside these next 2 years. I think he has the potential to be, you know, one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. But the decision making's got to be a point there. Um, Play calling was something on offense that felt, what would the word be? It felt like we had first halves that were excellent play calling, very, you know, mixing it up, really successful, playing well, overall, mixing it up, gaining yards, playing well offensively in the first half. Play calling is diverse and not the same play over and over again. And then we get into the second halves where it become really predictable and defenses just make those adjustments and we don't make the adjustment offensively. The two examples of that for me this season that just jump out at me is versus Idaho. We just kept Idaho made a adjustment defensively. They put in a new linebacker at halftime, new linebackers at halftime, I should say, or just before the half. And as soon as those dudes touched the field, Jared Taylor up the middle was getting shut down. And instead of realizing that and kind of adjusting, maybe throwing the ball a little bit more or getting Wortham more involved or whatever, we continued to call that same play, that same fake the option and run it up the middle or whatever. And Idaho could just shut it down. And that's kind of where it felt like the game changed to me. Same kind of thing with Idaho State. We kept going to this wildcat look with Tuna playing quarterback and just running the ball with him, and it was just so predictable that it's like obviously, if you don't have a guy like at least Wortham back there or someone that could kind of throw the ball, they can just key in on the run. I know you're trying to bleed the clock, but it just, I don't know. It feels like the play calling gets a little conservative in the second half sometimes, and it's something that could be improved on and just like in the second half improve upon what we have as that script in the first couple minutes. Continue that. Continue what we think is actually working rather than just or continue with what will work and make those adjustments rather than just doing what we were doing in the first half that worked. Like I don't know it. Like Sorry, I'm stumbling on my words here. It's tough to describe. Just I was really frustrated with some of the play calling at times in last season, especially in the second half. It's the key there. Um, and then we'll just move on. Another thing offensively that I was a little bit defensively, or a little bit disappointing, I should say. Excuse me. I thought Jacoby James and Anthony Stell Jr., who they were both guys that entered the portal after the season. They both kind of had disappointing seasons for me. Both those dudes that if you watch them on tape and watch their routes and watch them at camp or whatever, those two dudes seem like they could be ones at any school in the FCS. They seem like studs, but they just didn't have great seasons this year, and I don't necessarily think that's their fault. It felt like there was a lot of close opportunities to Stell, especially in early season games, where missing by that much, like it was just slightly off from Kiko or slightly off. Both those dudes were redshirt seniors that only had a year left of eligibility, so they ended up deciding to transfer out. And there's the young guys behind them. I'm not too worried about losing them necessarily. It just felt like they could have produced more in 2023 than they did. Jacoby James actually ended up at UMass, and I think Anthony Stell ended up at Incarnate Word. I'm not totally sure there, but you know, great players that I wish could have had better careers overall at Eastern Washington, but just didn't quite work out perfectly. Um, but moving on from the bad, we're gonna go ahead and hit on things that went well for the offense. Um, Number one for me, Kikoa is maturing. He's getting more. He's instead of being super dependent on the run, he's using his arm more. As the season went on, he continued to get more efficient overall. It seemed like. Um, Here's some stats to kind of show you how Kikoa's season went. He was number 16 in the country in completion percentage. He completed 66% of his passes, which is a great thing to see from a young quarterback. He was number 5 in the country in completions per game. He completed 25 passes per game, which is, again, fun to see. Um, Number 18 in overall passing yards, despite missing a game. I think if he plays that game, he probably has, around 3,000 yards. But he had 2,754 yards through the air this season. If he plays that Idaho game, I likely see him getting up close to that 3,000-yard mark. Um, he was number 8 in passing yards per game in the country, 275 yards a game. He had 19 passing touchdowns and 10 picks. Again, that's the ratio that we're hoping to see improved in upcoming seasons. More touchdowns, less picks, which I think will as he develops. Um, and his accuracy is still a little spotty at times, like I mentioned before. He misses high, but he's only going to be a junior next year. He still has 2 years at Eastern Washington, so we'll see. Another bright spot on offense. Kikoa looks absolutely electric running the football. The dude he moves at a different speed than everyone else on the field, and it's something you kind of see. Um, he rushed for 200 yards and a touchdown this season. I wish we would have used him a little more. I think him getting a little banged up in that Davis game might have hindered the coaching staff from using him in the run game more. I wish he would pull some of those RPOs more often. Game times where we pull a guard towards the running back side and then pull the ball and run with Kikoa out the other way. That's something that killed Eastern defensively, and I think it can kill some other teams defensively as well. Um, but you know, overall, Kikoa just looks super athletic. You could kind of tell as soon as he saw the field. That game against Florida, that game against Northern Colorado last year, where he got his time, and you could just tell the dude just runs so fast. He's so elusive, so quick. I'd love to see the yardage number get up closer to 300, 400 yards next year. Use his legs a little bit more, not be afraid to take off, and make sure he slides. That's another thing. I need him to stay healthy. He's still a little skinny, so. Another bright spot on offense. Overall, just the weapons are explosive, man. The receivers were all studs this year, which is typical. Kikoa is super explosive. Tuna is a good running back. Justice Jackson had a good season as well. Like the weapons and skill guys really seemed good. Number 82, Blake Goebel, the tight end, had a solid season. I would have liked it to be a little better, but he made a few awesome catches. So did Austin York on a backup tight end. Um, he played the F position, I believe, in that Eagle offense, but the skill positions overall felt just very explosive. A lot of playmakers, a lot of guys that could get the ball, and that's something that's going to continue with this upcoming season, these upcoming recruiting classes. Um, Again, one that stood out to me, Michael Wortham. I think he's got to be a focal point in the Eastern offense next year. Like he has to be, in my opinion. He's a dude that is a stud. He's a game changer, and I would love to see him improve or him get used in in the offense more. Uh, that's really all I gotta say there. I kind of hit on it earlier as well, but dude's just electric. I want to see him used a lot more in 2024. Couple notes here on just the receivers. Chisholm is just an absolute stud. Efton Chisholm the third. Um, he had eight receiving touchdowns this year, 932 receiving yards, which is good enough for number 18 in the country receiving yards wise. And he's now number 2 in Eastern history for receiving yards, if I believe right. He was a guy that was named to multiple All-American lists. He's a stud. He's one of the better, more consistent receivers I've seen here at Eastern Washington. Just one of the more elusive guys I've ever seen at that slot position spot. Nolan Ulm had a really quietly, really solid season. He's not the name you think of when you think of Eastern Washington receivers. You think more of a Chisholm, a Stell, who's a really flashy athlete. Same with Jacoby James, Trey Mason as well. And Ulm was kind of the what's the word? He seemed like the more consistent target out of all these guys. He's not the most explosive guy, but he's relatively big, I should say. He's like 6'2", reliable target. He had reliable hands. He catch the ball. He's going to run the right route. He's a very hard worker. Mr. Make It Happen. Go follow his YouTube channel if you haven't. And his podcast. I love his podcast. But very reliable target for Kikoa all season. The dude had 564 yards on 4 touchdowns this season. Um, just really reliable. He was the guy that kind of he went to. Him and Chisholm were the two guys that Kikoa went to on third down. They were the reliable targets that he knew would get open. He knew would catch the ball when it was to them, and it felt like he had a lot of chemistry with those two guys as well. Um, Another name to mention offensively, getting to see a few flashes of Miles Williams was really fun. I think Miles Williams is one of those young guys that's going to have a breakout next year, and I'm super excited to see what he does in 24 and 25. Um, Hitting the running game here, Tuna and Justice Jackson both had okay years. Tuna had 500 yards season, averaging 4.3 yards a carry. I'd love to see that average go up in 24. I think an improved offensive line play will help with that and getting more hands on the second level, like I was hitting earlier. Justice Jackson, who ended up entering the portal, he hasn't found a home quite yet, but uh, he rushed for just shy of 500 yards and averaged 6.2 yards a carry. He seemed like more of a bigger play type back, but he struggled with injuries throughout the year. He only suited up for 9 games, and I believe he only played in significant time in 7 or 8. He had a few really high moments though. Really hope he gets an opportunity in the portal. He was a fun guy. He's known for being kind of the one of the personalities of the team, being one of the funniest guys on the team. So, really hoping the best for Justice Jackson. Um, Another positive about the offense here, it was one of the lower offensive output years in Eastern history, or not history, I should say, but in the past 15. It was one of the lower output years, but we were able to rack up a lot more time of possession this year. Typical Eastern teams, the time of possession sits around 20 minutes at best. Um, you know, Trying to go fast, trying to, outpace and go with tempo. Um, this year's team was able to average 29 minutes and 17 seconds of time of possession per game, which is like I think it's the best I've seen out of an Eastern team in the past 10 years. Um, it really gives the defense a rest, and apparently it didn't work this year, but I think that's something that is good to see for the future. especially if you can average over 30 points a game, like you know we did most of the season. If you can score and you can keep the ball, kind of, it's not Idaho who averages what 40 minutes a game or whatever, something crazy like that, but averaging 30 minutes of time possession is always, kind of a mark to set your sights on it. Hold that ball, tire out that defense playing against you, and give your defense a rest overall. Good thing to see for the future here. Uh, Kind of wrapping it up a little bit here. Another something well that the whole team as a whole did well. Um, we were number 11 in the country in terms of penalty yards. There was only, I think we only gave up or only had 50 penalties on the season, which was one of the lower in the country, which is just a good thing to see. Penalties are never good. It shows discipline. It you know, shows a good head coach. And that kind of leads me into this next point here. Um, there's a lot of questions about the coaching staff um, after this season. There was a lot of mention of Coach Best should lose his job. We suck, yada yada yada. 2 years of being sub 500 at Eastern Washington, he should be gone. Um, I don't necessarily hate that Coach Best was kept around. I definitely felt like the DC needed to be fired, for sure. Jeff Kopp had two of the worst rushing defenses in Big Sky history the last 2 years, and he had to go. And it's tough to say, but I wouldn't mind a lot of shifting on that defensive staff for just to get some fresh blood in there. Few legs, not legacy Eags, but former Eags on there. Zach Bruce, the safeties coach, love guys like that. But um, it is something that I would like to see, especially the in the box type guys, defensive line and linebackers. That I'd love to see some improvement and a new face, new blood in, which is coming here. We'll have an episode when the new defensive coordinator gets announced. We'll talk about that on Eagles Power Hour here, but I personally did not hate that Coach Best kept his job. There's a lot of cries for him to be fired from both, you know, Eastern fans, from Big Sky fans, from national fans. Um, but something to note: Coach Best has a 48-32 record at Eastern Washington. He has been pretty much a lifelong Eastern Washington guy. He's been around since the '90s, despite except for that 1 year. He's a guy that took the team to a national championship. He's taken the team to the playoffs 3 out of his 7 years, which for any normal program, that's amazing. Obviously that's not what we want at Eastern Washington. That's not the standard. But, he's getting there in terms of his seats getting a little warm for sure. But if anyone is going to have a long leash, um, if anyone's gonna have a long leash coaching wise as a head coach at Eastern Washington, Coach Best is that guy. He's been an EKG his whole freaking college and professional life. Um, he's a dude that great guy from all reports I've heard, all people that have known him. I know like my dad knew him when he was a player, in Cheney. So, it, if anyone is going to get a little bit longer leash than they probably should, it is Coach Best. And I'm happy that he's still around. I love Coach Best. I don't know who we're gonna hire that's gonna be more of an Eagle guy than Coach Best. Um, I think 2024 is kind of his not career but future defining year. Um, he has an opportunity here to he has an opportunity in 2024 with a more favorable schedule to get some wins. And I think if he doesn't get those wins, then that's kind of where he ends up losing his job. You know, Here is a graphic of the upcoming schedule here. We have a really fun, favorable schedule that everyone should be going and buying their season tickets for right now. But if Coach Best doesn't make the playoffs 2024, I think it's time to move on. And that sounds horrible, and I wish that that wasn't the case because I love Coach Best. He's a guy that I wish we could keep on staff after if we have to end up moving on from him. But missing the playoffs in 3 straight years just isn't acceptable at Eastern Washington. You know, we're a program that's used to making the playoffs every year, at worst every other year. Missing it twice in a row just isn't acceptable. Um, and it's something that, isn't it's not going to be tolerated at Eastern Washington to lose, to have multiple losing seasons. Losing the damn cup in back-to-back years is not cool. Um, and he has a big opportunity here. I think having a really good season this upcoming season, possibly an 8-win season here. If Coach Best is able to produce that, I think he's a guy that probably gets extended. Um, I but if he has a losing season and this is the playoffs, I think he loses his job. I think it's one of those years for Coach Best. Uh, just how it seems from the outside looking in. I have no inside knowledge on this at all, but that's kind of my assessment on 2024. Um, we have the favorable schedule that we would need to get a chance at the playoffs for sure. We're bringing back a bunch of guys that are going to be the majority of the team this last year was sophomores. And most of them, if not all of them, will be coming back as more experienced and improved juniors who will play better, play more disciplined. We're going to have presumably a better defensive coordinator who kind of knows what he's doing there. Presumably a better scheme. Presumably, maybe we'll probably have some younger linebackers, but every other position on the field will be more experienced and more primed for a playoff run in 2023. In 2024, all those sophomores are going to be seniors, and barring the portal and barring, of course, the coaching change with Coach Best, um, I definitely think 24 and 25 are going to be two very important years in the history of Eastern Washington. I think it's kind of a turning point of are we going to go uphill or are we going to go downhill? Especially with Coach Best's tenure and where we end up going overall as a program, especially with all the damn turmoil and all the issues with faculty not liking the football program and all that situation that we're not going to get into now. But with all of this press and all of these issues, I really think it's important for Eastern to have a couple of good seasons here for the health of the program. I do not want Eastern Washington to get left behind with a program like Idaho coming in and having a lot of success, a program like Weber State coming back, a program like Idaho State looks like they're on the come up. I do not want Eastern Washington cannot become a bottom feeder in this league, and that it's just something that I I'd be seriously disappointed if that happened. So like I said, this upcoming season is very important for the future of Eastern Washington football and kind of which direction this program's gonna be headed. I think a couple of winning season sends this program back up towards the top because we have some studly recruiting classes these last 2 or 3, especially this season. I'm super juiced for. Um, you know, we're there's some plans and some hope to eventually get the stadium renovated. Like you know, it- it's stuff that more success I think can jumpstart the program back up to where we want it to be. And it's exciting to think about the future, but it's also a little scary thinking about, hey, if we have a couple bad years, it might be tough. So you know, I am hoping all for the best in 2024 and 2025. I really think there's a lot of potential for great seasons in 24 and 25. I think the roster's loaded with talent, and I think a lot of what we need is maybe a few key additions in the portal, as well as a good defensive coordinator coming in. I haven't heard anything about the defensive coordinator, and so when that's named, me and hopefully Kylor will be coming to you guys with another podcast talking about the new DC. But um, overall, it's an exciting and scary time to be an Eastern Washington fan. It's always a great day to be an East Eagle, but this feels like a little bit of a not tipping point, but a point where you can either fly or fall, and that's what these upcoming couple years will be. Um, I kind of talked to Kylor and asked him to give any points that he wanted to talk about, and of course he was at Frisco this past weekend, and the one thing that he wanted to add was was meeting after Chisholm was dope this weekend. He said great things about the recruiting class and said we have some absolute dogs. And I'm way better at flip cup and cup stacking than Afton Chisholm. That's what Kylor Neale had to add to the show. Um, I hope you guys enjoyed. I know there's probably a lot of flubbing and a lot of ranting and stuff like that probably didn't need to happen, but I'm passionate about Eastern Washington football, and I'm really hoping for the improvement, especially of that rushing defense, especially as a guy that loves rushing defense. Um, you know, I'm really just optimistic and hoping for improvement in 2024 from this team, and I think it's a realistic possibility. So, future episodes to keep a lookout for from Eagles Power Hour. Um, Defensive coordinator talking about transfer portal entries, as well as probably talking a little bit of a way too early, way too early projection into the 2024 season. Excuse me, and then we'll probably start picking it up here in a couple of months, talking about that 2024 season, like I was saying. But yeah. I'm not sure what the schedule will be for basketball. I don't really feel exactly qualified to be an analyzing basketball as a football guy that I didn't play high school basketball, so I can give a little half-ass takeaways and stuff, but I'm not exactly know if I'm qualified to do full podcast on it, as well as I don't know if that goes on Fans Nation Network. But um, just excited for the future of Eagles Power Hour, excited for the future of Eagle Athletics, and seriously, shout out to the basketball team. That basketball team this season is legit. So, uh, thank you guys for listening to Eagles Power Hour. I'm super excited about 2024. I think it's a season with a lot of potential to be a great season, a really fun season. Um, Hoping to see some improvements on that defense and overall. I think if we do, I think we have a legit chance at winning 8 games in 2024. So, you know, buy those season tickets, guys. They're available now. I think I might actually buy season tickets, even as a guy that lives in Moscow, Idaho, that goes to Idaho. I think I might buy some Eastern Washington season tickets because the schedule works out perfectly for me. So, yeah, I hope to see you guys out at Roos this fall. Super excited. Get excited for this upcoming season. I know it's way early, and I know that this is a late episode to be recapping, but um, just so excited for this upcoming season. Cannot wait to see the improvements in the program and all that stuff. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to Eagles Power Hour. Follow Eagles Power Hour on Twitter/X. It'll be linked down below. Follow me and Kylor Neale on X as well. Also linked down below. Follow and subscribe to FCS Fans Nation on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. I know it's all jaggedy and messy and ranty, but yeah, I'm still getting better at this. So thank you guys for listening, and goodbye.